right now here in Washington, there is a coordinated freakout targeting one of the wealthiest men in the world, not because he is hoarding wealth or because of inequality, because I don't know, he's seeking to control private data of millions and millions of people, but because he's insufficiently warlike. We're talking about Elon Musk, obviously. Elon Musk, who is in charge of the former Twitter social media platform now known as X, and also the X empire, the Tesla empire, major government contractor, someone who previously got good press and is the subject of a biography by Walter Isaacson, who's one of the most famous mainstream biographers in the US. He is a liberal, associated with the Democratic Party. But Musk gave him some access. Because why wouldn't you? I mean, the book is going to be in the front of every airport bookstore about yourself. Walter Isaacson is really like the mainstream biographer right now. He's sort of like Robert Caro, but maybe a lot less interesting. Anyway, so Walter Isaacson published a piece in the Washington Post last weekend about how Elon Musk had supposedly thwarted, I don't know if that was the language he used, thwarted a Ukrainian attack on the Russian naval fleet at Sevastopol, which is one of the key frontline Russian naval bases. It's
a big part of the reason that this war even happened in the first place, right?
Yeah, so it was going to be a Pearl Harbor style attack by unmanned aerial vehicles, basically submarine drones, and they needed Elon Musk's Starlink communication system to participate. And so the way Isaacson framed it initially was that Musk actually turned it off to avoid being a part of this, and then said, I didn't sign up to be part of some war coalition. I'm just a private US citizen, and I thought I was bringing peace and helping people in Ukraine by giving them Starlink, which is true. I mean, in a way, it's true. He was providing them with a free charity service when Russia had taken out their satellite system early on during the Russian military operation that began in February 2022. So Musk stepped in out of the, after being asked to, and gave them what they needed. And it's triggered a freak out. And the freak out is very specific to the Democratic Party. Democratic Party talking points are being distributed to attack Elon Musk over this. We'll get into that. I think the initial salvo was launched by Jake Tapper, who is sort of like the leading neocon personality at CNN. Someone who, and he had an interview with Tony Blinken last weekend and just went off on him. This is the thing. Jake Tapper and the rest of the corporate media neocons, they will never challenge a billionaire or a Western official unless they are insufficiently militaristic. Otherwise, it was just a softball interview, but then this part unfolded.
Has recently confirmed a report that's in Walter Isaacson's new biography of Musk that last year Musk blocked access to his Starlink satellite network in Crimea in order to disrupt a major Ukrainian attack on the Russian Navy there. In other words, Musk effectively sabotaged a military operation by Ukraine, a U.S. ally, against Russia, an aggressor country that invaded a U.S. ally. Should there be repercussions for that?
Jake, I can't speak to a specific episode. Here's what I can tell you.
I mean, anyway, so Blinken just deflects, because what is the Secretary of State going to do to Elon Musk? Like, what repercussions are they calling for? Is he going to announce the nationalization of X? Anyway, that's what this is all about, is like narrative control. The Democrats feel like they've lost the narrative on the most important social media platform for political public figures, whether they're journalists or politicians. And what Jake Tapper was doing, Wyatt, was lying. He was lying through his teeth. That is not what Elon Musk actually did. And Walter Isaacson, following that Jake Tapper interview, had to issue a correction. Here's Walter
Right.
Isaacson's correction. To clarify on the Starlink issue, the Ukrainians thought coverage was enabled all the way to Crimea, but it was not. They asked Musk to enable it for their drone sub-attack on the Russian fleet. Musk did not enable it because he thought, probably correctly, that would cause a major war. Whoops. So anyway, this just kind of undercuts the whole narrative of Tapper and the pro-war Democrats,
Right.
but they're still rolling with it.
I like how that's a clarification too. It's
Yeah,
you're totally walking back the original claim. You know, that should be a retraction, right? You said a lie, and now you are conceding that it was a lie, but you're pretending that you were just misunderstood or something. Also, just to point out, the United States and the Ukraine are not military allies. They're not a member of NATO. They are labeled, I believe, a strategic partner under certain certain sense, but they are not an ally in any formal sense. But this is a claim that gets repeated over and over again. This is part of what's being used to justify the demonization of Elon Musk's. We'll get into it here in a second, because Musk has actually come out and clarified the position, exactly what happened after following this massive freak out. As you noted, the only time they're ever going to come out after a billionaire like this is for some perceived transgression against the military-industrial complex. But it seems to be the case that Musk himself was not authorized to turn on Starlink in the first place. Not that he, so the story has evolved so dramatically over the course of a couple of days. First, it was that he specifically shut off Starlink coverage, and now we know that that coverage was never enabled in the first place. And the reason why is because to do so would be to violate U.S. sanctions against Russia. So, so we'll get into that here. It might be worth putting up.
Here's Elon Musk's
here
own explanation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, it's just undercuts the narrative that the Democrats, the like CNN, MSNBC are pushing right now. When you consider that U.S. citizens are not allowed to operate in Crimea because it's sanctioned. Here's Elon Musk without the volume on, and now here's him with the volume on.
Yeah, but at the time this happened, the region around Crimea was actually turned off.
He's in some vast hall or something, so the sound is terrible. He's saying
he's on a plane using Starlink. And zooming into this summit in Los Angeles.
All right.
The reason it was turned off was actually originally was because the United States has sanctions against Russia, and we're not allowed to actually, and that includes Crimea in the sanctions, and we're not allowed to actually turn on connectivity to a sanctioned country without explicit government approval, which we did not have from the U.S. government. So basically, Ukraine didn't give us any advance warning or heads up or anything. But we just got the sort of urgent calls from the Ukrainian government saying that we needed to turn on Crimea. It's like in the middle of the night, basically. And we're like, "What are you talking about? What's it for?"
I mean, they're kind of laughing at it sounds silly, like, oh, we're doing a military operation. Right. Let's call some billionaire in the middle of the night. Maybe it'll work and we'll destroy Russia's Navy. Like, is that the level that the Ukrainians are operating at?
I mean, it's absurd.
It is absurd. So, I mean, yes, there was the chance, as even Walter Isaacson acknowledged, that this could have caused World War III, would have caused a major military escalation. But to me, it seems like it would have been just crossing another red line while initiating another bungled attack, like the Ukrainian special forces landing in Crimea, which ended in disaster for them as they fail dramatically in the counteroffensive. They're mounting all these terror attacks on Crimea and across the Russian Federation that don't do any structural damage and usually aren't even successful from a tactical point of view.
Right.
And then,
yeah.
we basically figured out that this was kind of like a Pearl Harbor type attack on Sebastopol, on the Russian fleet in Sebastopol. So they're really asking us to really proactively take part in a major act of war. While we certainly have huge support for the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian government is not in charge of U.S. People or companies. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Do you hear that applause?
So here making
People
an
or
excellent point.
companies.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the most
That's not how it
popular,
works.
Yeah.
And Elon,
but
if I could just-
but
But I should say that, although I'm not President Biden's biggest fan, if I had received a presidential directive to turn it on, I would have done so, because I do regard the president as the chief executive officer of the country. Whether I want that person to be the president or not, I still respect the office. And so if I gotten a request from the president type of thing, from the American president, to be clear,
Yeah.
Or from the CIA director?
then I would have
the
done
real
it.
president.
But no such request came through.
Well, there's a lot you can say there. I mean, one kind of secondary point I would make is that the Biden administration it's unclear if the Biden administration actually wanted such an attack to take place or succeed. Especially at that point, they weren't yet ready to attack Crimea. But I mean, what else does that say about, the relationship between Musk and the government, Wyatt?
Well, he's trying to preserve that relationship. He doesn't want to kill the golden goose. This is what's made his massive fortune possible in the first place. With all these government contracts, these government subsidies for all of his companies, whether that be SpaceX or Tesla. He's
Right.
trying to play nice. He's trying to play both sides, basically, right? Talking about how absurd and ridiculous this request was. But if it had come from our pretend president who can barely string two sentences together, then of course he would have honored it, because, he respects the office or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's mealy mouthed. But at this point, even a mealy mouthed, two-faced billionaire is better than the Blinken administration. Let's call it that, because I don't know who is actually really calling the shots at this point. Certainly not Biden himself.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Blinken, Newland, it's Biden's kitchen cabinet, and then you have the Pentagon. And Wyatt, I mean, I actually don't have it in front of me, but on this point, because what part of the Democrats' criticism, which is sort of valid, but it's warped, of Elon Musk in this situation, is that the U.S. government shouldn't be relying on billionaires to wage a war effort. For example, there's a new Senate Democrat letter where they're demanding the Pentagon investigate Elon Musk's contracts. It's wild. The wording, here it is. Senate Democrats are demanding that the Pentagon turn over information about Musk's Starlink contracts with the U.S. military to investigate whether there are safeguards in them to prevent another version of the recent fiasco. The fiasco in which he didn't it wasn't even Zelensky who was demanding he turn on Starlink. It was Mikhailo Fedorov, who is the Minister of Digital Transformation. So it was some low-level deputy prime minister telling him to do it. So failing to listen to a foreign deputy prime minister has prompted the Democrats to demand the Pentagon investigate all of an American billionaire's contracts. And they're aggressively probing the Musk Ukraine fiasco from every angle. And they accuse him of meddling. I mean, if you read, they're accusing him of effectively defending Russian interests. So this is sort of a version of Trump Russia, where they're basically transplanting the Trump Russia narrative onto Elon Musk. And we'll talk about what this is about in a second. But why aren't they asking for a probe of other billionaires and companies that the US and Ukraine are relying on entirely for this war effort. For example, Palantir, which actually Peter Thiel founded, but it's run by a guy named Alex Karp now, who's much more of a bipartisan player. He was at the last two Bilderberg conferences in Washington and Lisbon, Portugal, with all the NATO chief and all the Five Eyes intelligence heads. And Palantir is responsible for all the targeting and maps that the US CENTCOM, the Pentagon, is supplying to the Ukrainian military. Palantir is using AI to develop maps and targeting systems. And it's not as though the US government is supplying this. It's a private corporation that's a private spying corporation that's involved in so many surveillance scandals, hoovering up Americans' data without their permission. And it was actually featured in that 60 Minutes segment, Wyatt, that you tweeted, where the 60 Minutes correspondent goes to meet with Mark Milley, and send it to me in the private chat or something, and I'll throw it up on screen. But basically, Milley says we have open pipes, open intelligence pipes to the Ukrainians, and it basically shows how the U.S. is running Ukrainian operations from the operations room. And all those maps on screen are from Palantir, but nobody cares about that in Washington because Palantir is doing what NATO wants. It's doing what Ukraine wants. It's doing what the Pentagon wants. Elon Musk just steps back for a second, behaves like a private citizen, and then all of a sudden the hell and fire and fury rains down on his head from the Democrats, because this is Biden's war coming up on re-election, and Elon Musk, they're blaming him basically for screwing up Biden's re-election by failing to mount this Pearl Harbor style attack. And what do they care if we go to the brink of nuclear war?
Well, and for following the U.S. law, right? For following the sanctions, which demand that he receive express permission from the U.S. government to be able to allow Starlink to be activated over Crimea in the first place.